Okay.
And then this is backwards and forwards.
Okay. All right.
It's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. So our next speaker is from Dulworth Farms in Ballard County, and she's kind of going against the grain in Ballard County. Not many cows left. And her and her husband Toby have taken land that was row crop for a long time and putting it back into pasture slowly and kind of regenerating those soils over time. So she's going to have a real interesting perspective on grazing. So Debbie.
I feel very fortunate to be here today, and thank you all for coming out, bucking the pandemic and all of that to be here. Okay. I don't talk very loud, sorry.
Okay, try that.
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay. Toby and I have been farming together since 1977, which is when we got married. I was not a farm kid, but all my grandparents were. And I guess I've got it in my blood because I love it. What you see here is the picture on the left is of a field day that we had at our farm in 2018. That's Greg Brand talking into the mic, and I'm next to him. That's Chris next to him, and Dr. Ray Smith over there on the other side. And behind the camera was Jimmy Henning. So I want to thank all of them for all the help they've given us and all the encouragement they've given us over the years. Over here on that side of the picture, that's Toby, my husband. He's not the tall one, he's the other one. And that's a young man from here in Princeton that we have been mentoring for the past several years, since about 2016. He is trying to regenerate a farm too that was over-farmed and the soil was worn out. We had cows grazing corn stalks a lot before we started doing pastures. In 2010, we took, well, I'm having trouble keeping it on task. In 2010, our pastures looked like that. And we had a field day in 1999 where we used grazing maize, which is one kind of forage that you can use to transition from row crop to new pasture. And now, in those same places, improved fescue has replaced the row crops. And we do a lot of stockpiling. Those are the forages that we have planted on our farm in the past 20 years. And some of them have worked out, some of them haven't. But I'm not going to read all those. But you can see we've tried a lot of things. The cow on the left is grazing sorghum Sudan grass. One's in the middle, that's just a mixed pasture with probably, I'd say, 12 different varieties in it. And the one on the right, that calf's eating turnips. And we've used all kinds of things. All of those things will help to put pounds on calves. This past summer, or not this past summer, yes, we did some this past summer, some summer annuals, but this was taken in 2018 before that field day that was at our house. We do mob grazing of summer annuals to concentrate the nutrients on the ground, and we're fortunate now to have a big enough cow herd to do that. We used millet and dwarf millet, Sudan grass, the sorghum Sudan hybrids, grazing maize, and mixtures of all those things. This was one of the things that the cows liked the very best. That was Chris's Crazy Mix, which had, I don't know how many, 11 varieties or something. And the cows just absolutely loved it. They ate every bite of that stuff. And the calves gained well on it. We had cows, heifers, and calves, and we also had the bull and breeding them at the same time, and they conceived very well. So all of those things made that their favorite stuff. Here they're grazing tall millet, sorghum Sudan grass, and you can see where the tractor went through. There's a poly wire down through the middle of that path on the right there. You can see how much organic matter was going into the ground. And it got trampled in very well, worked in, and it helped rebuild the soil. And this is on a farm that we have rented for the past 40 well, Toby started renting it before we married, so 46 years. And it was very, that this is a dwarf BMR millet, and the cows really like that too. We were able, it was planted in June. It got one good rain, and then it was very dry. And then we got a flood. We started getting rain the day of the field day, which didn't make the field day any better, but it sure did help the forages. And then in August we got another flood, and we grazed that BMR millet 4 times between August and October. Ryegrass. Here's a beautiful field of ryegrass. That picture was taken in 2008. People really think that's beautiful because it's so uniform, and people really like uniformity, but cows much prefer diversity, and the more the better. So grasses and legumes and forbs are all things that cattle like to graze. We've been management-intensive grazing. I started with an experiment on 12 acres in 1989, and the hardest thing for a lot of people to learn is that it's the management that's intensive and not the grazing. You don't want to overgraze. You can see that there's still quite a lot of residue there where the cattle have been. Our end product is custom freezer beef and USDA beef for retail. And we do that because there's a lot of demand now for all natural beef that's raised without any kind of chemicals. That means we can't use chemical fertilizer. That means we can't use, oh, it's running away from me. Okay, we can't use a lot of the things we've been talking about here today. We don't use herbicides, we don't use insecticides, we don't use wormer on any of our steers or any of our cows that we harvest for beef. The reason we do that is that's the customers demand that. These are people, some of them have health problems like cancer and that kind of thing that their doctors have recommended grass-fed beef. And so they have a hard time finding it. It's really hard to find. And so they're very glad to have our product. And because of that, we get a good price for our beef. Year in, year out, we can get $1.69 a pound for a whole custom beef. We get, for our retail prices, a little better than Kroger gets. The reason that we can do that is that our cattle have been selected and adapted to all natural production on pasture only. Ever since Toby started in 1964 when he was 13 years old, our cows have had no grain, ever. Oh yeah, 1 year, 2002, when we tried to sell some breeding stock and the sale manager told us we had to feed our cows. It didn't work. They didn't sell any better than they would have if they hadn't had any grain. His dad told him that cattle are meant to eat grass, that corn is for hogs, dairy cows, mules, and horses. And that's the way it's always been. Our fescue that I showed you the picture of a while ago, well, why is it running like that? That's fescue that was stockpiled since late summer being grazed under snow. It's at its best in cool weather, and cows will always prefer it. They are like our allies. They always prefer to graze, and they always prefer the grazes that are to graze the forages that are adapted to each season. February, that shows what David was talking about. They can't graze when the ryegrass is under ice or when the fescue and orchard grass are under snow and sleet that has frozen over the surface. But by March, the stockpile's all been grazed. Clover seed can be broadcasted if needed. The soil's moist and well fertilized. The days will get longer than the nights. That's something we can count on. Temperatures will rise and grass will grow. We plant a lot of cereal rye and red clover when we're renovating row crop land for early grazing. There's some rye and ryegrass pictured in March, plenty big enough to graze. The cows grazing ryegrass and white clover in mid-April, and This mix over here has red clover in it, rye, cereal rye, and red clover. And you can start grazing very well in March if you use those things. We like spring and fall calving, which is very helpful for direct marketed natural beef. The grass finishing allows us to adjust the calving to fit the seasons of April and September, which are our favorite months to calve. We do have some stragglers occasionally. Those are the ones we sell. In May grazing, this is a cool season mix. The cows need a wide variety of forage plants after they have calved to repair their bodies. They need to regain weight and condition to be able to cycle in time to rebreed. And again, legumes and other forbs are vital to that. In April and May, we have to move them fast. We take half and leave half. And you can graze a little closer at that time of year than you can most times because, of course, the grass is leaping. We use 3 types of ryegrasses for various things. An annual is good with cereal rye and crimson clover and wheat. We use Italian ryegrass with red clover. We use perennial ryegrass for high traffic areas and high quality pastures where we want heifers to rebreed because it's so very nutritious. They're good as cover crop after corn or soybeans, and they're good in rotation with crabgrass and lespedeza for later on in the summer. We drilled them into thinning alfalfa, and we broadcast them over grazed cool season perennials to thicken the stands. So in May 2008, there's a picture of a cornfield. Had been in cultivation for at least 40 years, perhaps 60. We're not sure. And there's the same field in 2016 in mid-May after it had been grazed hard and was resting. And you can see there's some good residual grass there, and that there will be residue after the grazing and it's been trampled. Ideal grazing in May and June comes when you get plenty of rain, and we had a great stand that year. Excellent diversity there, plenty of a balanced variety of grasses, legumes, and forbs. You can't really see the forbs that well, but there's quite a bit of dock in there. There are a lot of dandelions in there. There's some plantain, and we have probably in that field there were at least 4 varieties of grasses. Spring ryegrass and clover usually give way to summer crabgrass and alfalfa. You can see there a little stray plant of alfalfa. We don't try to get solid stands of anything. In 2015, there's an example of what happens when you get too much rain. But floods are always better than drought. And if you've got plenty of roots there, the deeper the roots will penetrate, which means there's less runoff and more moisture retained in the root zone. We're at an altitude of between 275 and 350 feet above sea level, so we're pretty wet. We're in the very last crook of the Ohio River. This is 2015 before grazing, and during grazing, you can see the hoof action and the manure there, which will prepare soil for reseeding legumes with a broadcast seeder. In the drought of 2012, we got a half of an inch of rain from March to June, and the steers were grazing mature rye, which did remarkably well to keep them in good condition. They grazed that dry rye through June and July of 2012. There it is before grazing, and there it is after grazing. The cows were having a little harder time than the steers, but by the end of that time, it was trampled and ready for reseeding. It was well fertilized and ready for rain. The steers enjoyed it, and there was some volunteer rye that came up in 2013, and that's what they're grazing there. Grazing and trampling and moving on, resting it every 21 days or more, does all of this. It builds topsoil and develops the drought-resistant fields, reduces parasite loads and fly populations, feeds microbe populations for living soil, and it increases the fertility year after year. And if we're going to stockpile cool season grass, we need forages adapted to hot weather, both grasses and legumes, forage corn and maize, teff, crabgrass, all of those things are good in hot weather. Cowpeas is a great one too. We planted some teff one year. That wasn't on my list of 39 because we've only grown it one time, but it was very good. And you can see soybeans in the field in the background there, where there is now forage and hay. Eastern gamagrass is something we love. We have 10 acres of it. It's a very hardy, very long-lived warm season perennial that we planted in 1996. You can see the difference between that and the two pictures at the top, which is that newly planted field of where we had corn and we tried planting perennials. 2012 wrecked our new planting. But now that same field has improved fescue with a diversity that's replaced those decades of row crops. We like a forage team for summer graze or hay of lespedeza, red clover, and crabgrass. And the cows can graze that, or you can hay it. And Toby did a very good job getting a lot of hay off of it several years. We had 70 head on 40 acres for more than a full month, an acre per day in mid-autumn. And that was a great fall calving pasture, and it saved the stockpile cool season grasses for use when they were at their best. That's a brassica mix that we planted in 2009, turnips, kale, and there were clovers in there. There were some grasses too, some ryegrass. So we always try to plan and plant with the grazing season in mind, and we always try to think green. And we can moderate climate by observing, remembering, responding, and adapting our ways to nature. That's the key to a healthier future climate: more grass, less grain, more forage, less tillage, and year-round roots. And here also, there are ecosystem solutions for those rising fertilizer costs. Since we can't use it, we can't use artificial fertilizer, we replace chemical fertilizers with legume seeds, frost-seeded, various clovers and lespedeza to provide nitrogen. Manure straight from the ruminants boosts microbial activity in the soil. There are no more microbes anywhere in the world than in a cow's rumen. Hoof traffic, carefully grazing, frequent grazing recycles the nutrients fast for NP and K. And forage plant diversity, the many palatable forbs that Dr. Rayburn was talking about, native perennial grasses, taprooted broadleaf plants like dock, plantain, and dandelion to recycle a wider variety of minerals from deep underground. All of those things work together. I thought I would end with just a couple of slides of our Forage Field Day in 2018. That's Dr. Henning walking toward us there on that dusty road. And we had those 12 plots of summer annuals planted June 7th to 10 on that rented farm where we're trying to regenerate the soil for the landlord. That's another picture of the field day, and that's all I have for today.
Good job. Okay, so go ahead and stay up here, and we'll ask David to come up. I'm going to raise the shades, but is there any questions for David or Debbie on their grazing systems? Got one over there. Who's it?
I do it whenever I can. I usually start around the end of January, and I usually finish around the end of April, and just on any day that's suitable for that, that'll hold up the tractor, that's when I frost seed.
Yeah, we try to do it all in February. If we can catch a day, this last year we had some kind of freezing rain deal that came in, and so we frost seeded that the day after that and tried to get it all done at one time. For one reason, it was a lot easier to see where you went, so it was a lot easier to get done faster.
This is is a great lead into my talk this morning. Is there any other questions for David or Jimmy?
Debbie, you're grazing and you're leaving a lot of residue. What do you estimate your output per acre is with your meat?
Well, the steers are all finished on about a 40-acre field, and we don't worry too much about how long it takes them to finish. Some of them do a lot better. Some of them will finish. We've had them finish as early as 18 months, and I mean finished. And we've had them take as long as 3.5 years. So we use those things to cull the animals that don't finish as early. We don't use their sires anymore. We retire their dams and turn them into beef. And those are the things that we do to, we figure as long as they're there, they're fertilizing, so they're helping pay their way. Very much so, yes. Yes. We are already transitioning more to perennials. Now for finishing steers, if you really want them to finish fast, you need to provide them something that's very high energy, like the turnips. That's a very good thing. You don't want to feed turnips too close to slaughter, though, because you'll have beef that tastes like turnips. And most folks don't want that. But we just feel that the economics of perennials are a whole lot better than the economics of annuals.
You didn't mention your sorghum Sudan grass. Do you use sorghum Sudan grass in your operation too?
Yeah, I mean, all I went over really was what we do in the winter, but we do try to, in the summertime, any thin standing pastures, or, if you've got a pasture that's getting thin, or little traps that we have up close to the working facility, we will plant sorghum Sudan grass on all of those. We try to come in and graze without, and I really didn't want to kill my pesky orchard grass that was still there. So we came in and grazed that off pretty close, and then planted that sorghum Sudan grass in that, because if you try to plant, and trust me when I tell you this, if you try to plant sorghum Sudan grass in standing fescue that's 4 inches tall, it just won't compete. So you really have to get that other forage off of there, and then the sorghum Sudan grass will kind of complete. It will end up kind of playing out towards the end of the summer, but we do graze that about 5 different times throughout the summer. It is a fantastic forage for cows. We did not have very good luck with the calves grazing that. When we took weaning weights, I was just not very pleased with that. It just didn't turn out like I thought it would. But as far as the cow condition goes, it was fantastic. Cows are probably in better shape than they've ever been after that deal. And then we'll come back in those same fields and plant Marshall ryegrass or some type of annual ryegrass to start grazing on in February. We'll usually turn our first calf heifers, after they calve, we usually turn them out on the Marshall ryegrass.
I've got to ask for Adam Barnes about soybeans. Have you ever tried soybeans for hay?
Yes, we have many years ago, probably before we had the equipment that we have now. It was really tough to get things dried out enough to get it put up the quality of the hay, but it can be done. We do take a second and a third cutting on our hay ground because we've got so much Johnson grass now. And if any of you know that food with Johnson grass, it's hard to get it to dry down. And so we usually, this year was the first year that we've gotten it all up without it being some of it molded. So, but it makes a great forage. If I could get it cut when I'm supposed to, it'd be a lot better. But as everybody else, it just get it cut when you can.
Is there any other questions for Debbie or David? let's thank them for the presentation.